Step into the shadowy remains of a time long forgotten. The air is heavy with a musty coldness that clings to your skin, as though the very walls are breathing secrets they dare not whisper aloud. The creak of warped wooden floors echoes like distant cries, each step unsettling layers of dust that have blanketed this place for decades. A dim shaft of light filters through a shattered window pane, illuminating the tattered edges of faded curtains and empty coffins left to decay in silence. The faint but unmistakable smell of age and rot lingers, weaving with it an uneasy tension that almost feels alive. This is no ordinary ruin. This abandoned funeral home stands as a testament to things left unsaid, to stories buried and forgotten, or perhaps deliberately erased. Strange tales surround this place, whispered through the lips of those who dare only mention it in the safety of daylight. They speak of unexplainable shadows, of faint voices that call out in the dead of night, and of an unshakable terror that grips anyone who steps too close. What could this long-abandoned funeral home possibly hide within its crumbling walls, and what would drive an entire town to turn its back on it, leaving its dark history to fester in secrecy? What secrets lie just beneath the surface, too chilling to confront, yet too tantalizing to ignore? Stay with us as we venture deeper into the eerie silence of the forgotten funeral home, where every corner holds a mystery waiting to be unraveled, and every discovery brings us closer to uncovering a truth far more terrifying than we could ever imagine. Prepare yourself, this is a story you will not soon forget. Now turning to the heart of our story, we arrive at the infamous Blackthorne Mortuary, an eerie relic nestled on the outskirts of the desolate town of Ravens Hollow. Once a modest and respected establishment, it now stands forgotten, its presence a ghostly shadow against the backdrop of an overcast sky. The building's once pristine facade has surrendered to the ravages of time, with cracked windows that distort the dying light and peeling paint that reveals splintering wood beneath. Overgrown vines twist and crawl across the structure like nature's attempt to reclaim what humanity left behind, their knotted tendrils forming a morbid embrace around the abandoned walls. The roof sags under years of neglect, and rust streaks the metal fixtures, staining them like tears that will never dry. Locals speak of Blackthorne Mortuary in hushed tones, their voices dropping as if even the mention of its name might invite something unwelcome into their lives. Children dare one another to approach it, only to flee at the sound of the wind whistling through its broken panes. Ravens Hollow itself seems to shrink away from the mortuary, its streets growing quieter the closer you get, as though the very air grows heavier in warning. It has become a local legend, a place where rumors of hauntings and unexplainable phenomena refuse to fade. Some say they have seen shadowy figures flickering in the windows, or worse, lingering near the overrun grounds. Others claim to have heard faint sobs emanating from within when walking past on particularly still nights. But the most unsettling detail of all is the silence surrounding its sudden abandonment. Decades ago, the mortuary ceased operation without announcement or explanation. One day, its doors were shut, its windows darkened, and its caretakers vanished without a trace. No record exists of its closure, no formal documentation to explain why it was left to rot. It was as though the mortuary simply faded from the town's collective memory, its grim secrets buried along with its past. What could have happened here to provoke such an abrupt end? And why does this forgotten funeral home continue to hold such a sinister grip on Ravens Hollow? With these questions looming, the true mystery of Blackthorne Mortuary begins to unravel. and the deeper we step into its shadow, the more chilling its secrets become. Now turning to the protagonist of our tale, we meet Ellie Grayson, a journalist whose passion lies not in the mundane stories of day-to-day life, but in unearthing the darkest, most hidden truths the world wishes to forget. Ellie is the kind of person who views the shadows not as places to avoid, but as spaces that hold the most compelling mysteries. Her unyielding determination and sharp intuition have earned her a reputation for uncovering secrets others are too afraid to confront. She is resourceful, fearless, and deeply drawn to the macabre, traits that set her apart from the ordinary. It is her insatiable curiosity that leads her to the forsaken Blackthorne Mortuary. While working on a series of articles about urban legends, Ellie happens upon a peculiar thread in her research, a thread that no one else had dared to pull. She stumbles across scattered mentions of a forgotten funeral home, its name surfacing in hushed whispers on old online forums, ghost story blogs, and dusty local records. But it is not just the mortuary's eerie reputation that catches her attention. It is the glaring lack of information surrounding its sudden abandonment. To Ellie, this is more than just an intriguing legend. It is a challenge begging to be unraveled. Her intrigue deepens when she receives an anonymous letter slipped under the door of her apartment. It is written on aged, yellowing paper, the kind you might find tucked away in an old attic. The ink is smudged in places as though written in haste, and it bears no signature. The letter contains only a few cryptic words. Blackthorne hides what should never be found. Start with the ledger. At first, Ellie considers dismissing it as a prank, but something about the tone of the message clings to her, like a whisper she cannot shake. Driven by the mysterious letter and her growing determination, Ellie decides there is no turning back. With her camera, notebook, and flashlight in hand, she sets her sights on Raven's Hollow, prepared to confront whatever secrets Blackthorne Mortuary holds. Little does she know, this journey will not only test her courage, but challenge her understanding of what lies beyond the veil of the known world. As Ellie approaches the gates of Raven's Hollow, the air seems to grow heavier, and a quiet unease begins to creep into her thoughts. What she is about to uncover will forever change her grasp of reality and herself. Now turning to the dark history of Blackthorne Mortuary, we step back in time to when this now forgotten building was once a cornerstone of Raven's Hollow. Established over a century ago, the mortuary was founded by the Blackthorne family, who were known for their precision and somber dedication to their craft. This was not merely a business, it was a legacy, passed down through generations of Blackthorns, each meticulously maintaining the family's reputation for providing solace to grieving families. Among them, there was one name that stood out above all others: Arthur Blackthorne. He was the last known owner of the mortuary, and a man shrouded in quiet intensity. Arthur was described as reserved, almost reclusive, yet unnervingly meticulous in his work. It was said that he could restore even the most broken forms to appear almost lifelike, a skill that prompted fascination from some and unease from others. Locals recall seeing lights flickering late into the night from the mortuary's upper windows, long after the last mourner had departed. Arthur was often seen moving through the shadows, a solitary figure wrapped in silence, consumed by the details of his macabre trade. But Arthur's story takes a disturbing turn. The records show that one day, without explanation, Arthur disappeared. No obituary, no farewell, just an empty void where he once stood. Those closest to him, though few and far between, insisted that Arthur had not simply vanished, but that something far more sinister had occurred. Around the same time, rumors began to spread about disappearances linked to the mortuary's operations. Families who entrusted their deceased loved ones to Blackthorne Mortuary began to report strange occurrences, coffins that seemed heavier than they should be, embalming delays with no clear reason, and worst of all, a few families claimed their loved ones never returned to them at all. These chilling whispers painted a picture of grief layered with unanswered questions, leaving the community in a quiet state of unrest. Despite these murmurs, no formal investigation was ever launched. For some, the stigma surrounding death itself was enough to keep them silent. For others, fear of what they might uncover held them back. As the years passed and the mortuary's shutters were drawn closed for the final time, the building fell into disrepair, swallowed by time and its secrets. Yet the whispers never truly stopped. Even decades later, those who dared to speak of the Blackthorne family would do so in hushed tones, as though the echoes of their story still had the power to haunt the living. And so the mortuary stood abandoned, a hollow shell of its former self, its walls silently bearing witness to events that Raven's Hollow would rather forget. With this ominous history looming over her, Ellie's arrival at Blackthorne Mortuary is more than just the start of an investigation. It is a confrontation with the unsettling weight of a past steeped in mystery. What she uncovers within its walls will cast doubt on everything she thought she understood about loss, death, and the fragile line between this world and the one beyond. As the next chapter of Ellie's journey begins, she stands before the looming silhouette of Blackthorne Mortuary. The air feels heavier here, as if the building itself is exhaling the weight of its forgotten stories. Ellie hesitates for a moment, her journalist instincts clashing with the unease bubbling within her. But curiosity prevails, and with a deep breath, she pushes open the warped wooden door. The hinges groan in protest, breaking the stillness as she steps into the funeral parlor's shadowy expanse. Dust clings to every surface, the faint scent of mildew mingling with something indescribable, a smell that seems to root itself deep in her thoughts. Her flashlight beam dances across the room, illuminating rows of worn chairs, neatly lined as though awaiting an audience that never came. The echoes of her footsteps bounce off the walls, amplifying the eerie emptiness. Ellie's gaze lands on a cluster of unmarked urns perched atop a crumbling shelf, their once polished surfaces now dulled by time. She reaches out, brushing her fingertips against one, only to withdraw sharply as a chill runs through her, far colder than the air around her. Venturing further, she finds herself in the embalming room. The metallic glint of outdated mortuary tools catches her eye, their edges rusted and edges dulled, yet somehow still menacing. A cracked porcelain basin sits ominously in the center of the room, its surface stained with ghostly remnants of its past use. Ellie's flashlight hovers over a wall lined with empty shelves, save for a single jar filled with a murky, unidentifiable substance. It's as if this space was abandoned in haste, the tools of the trade left behind like forgotten relics of some dark ritual. But it's in the cold storage room where Ellie's unease deepens into something more tangible. The temperature drops noticeably, her breath creating faint wisps in the dim light. The room is unnervingly silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and pricks at your senses. As her light sweeps across the rows of rusted gurneys and decaying storage cabinets, She notices an old ledger lying on the floor, its leather cover brittle with age. She lifts it carefully, only to discover torn pages and cryptic scribbles that seem to have been intentionally obscured. Names, dates, and undecipherable symbols line the surviving pages, each entry more enigmatic than the last. And then it happens. A faint whisper brushes past her ear, so soft it could almost be mistaken for the wind, but there is no wind here. Ellie freezes, her pulse quickening as she spins around, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. A shadow flickers at the edge of her vision, vanishing before her eyes can fully settle on it. The sense of being watched grows undeniable, a presence pressing down on her like an unseen weight. She backs out of the room slowly, her steps careful and deliberate, her heart pounding in her chest. It's clear that this is no ordinary abandoned building. The mortuary's silence is not a passive one, it feels alive, as though the walls themselves are holding their breath, waiting, watching. Ellie knows she's only scratched the surface, yet the chilling discoveries have already sent a shiver down her spine. As she retreats to gather her thoughts, she begins to wonder if she's stumbled onto something far more sinister than she ever imagined. Now turning to the puzzling ledger in Ellie's trembling hands, its brittle pages seem to whisper secrets of the past as she carefully examines them. Though many pages are torn and others smeared with time, fragments of information begin to emerge. Her eyes trace over what appear to be notes about deliveries, cryptic mentions of items arriving late at night, marked only by initials and vague descriptions. The words feel deliberately veiled, as though hiding their true intent behind an innocent facade. There are dates, too, scattered across the ledger, their pattern irregular but unsettlingly consistent with the timeline of the disappearances she read about in her earlier research. Ellie's flashlight casts a narrow beam on a portion of the pages where words abruptly stop mid-sentence and are replaced by strange symbols, shapes, and marks that defy immediate understanding, like a language not meant to be spoken. Her mind races, trying to connect the dots. Specific names also appear sporadically alongside the dates. They are unfamiliar, likely belonging to people whose stories have been long forgotten. Yet something about their inclusion feels deliberate, heavy with hidden meaning. Some entries are even struck through with such force that the pen has torn through to the next page. The effort to obscure whatever history these pages once held is evident, and its presence only deepens her curiosity. As Ellie pieces together more fragments, a chilling realization begins to dawn on her. The ledger does not document ordinary business operations. It hints at something far more secretive and sinister. Could these cryptic entries correspond to the stories of bodies mysteriously disappearing from Blackthorne Mortuary? The unspoken question looms heavily over her thoughts, as the incomplete records suggest more than just neglect. They feel like an attempt to erase evidence. What could have been so damning that even the pages themselves were torn out, as though someone wanted to bury the truth alongside the long-forgotten dead? Her pulse quickens as she recalls the whispers of townsfolk who spoke of family members vanishing without explanation. They had reached out for closure, only to be met with silence and shadows. Could there be a link between the names within this ledger and those lost souls? And what of the unmarked deliveries? Did they arrive under the cover of darkness to avoid the light of prying eyes? The thought sends a shiver coursing through her, the weight of the ledger now feeling impossibly heavier in her hands. The unanswered questions multiply as Ellie wrestles with the implications of what she's found. This ledger is not just a relic of the past, it is a key, albeit an incomplete one, to unlocking the grim mystery that has shrouded Blackthorne Mortuary in darkness for so long. As Ellie files the information away in her mind, her determination hardens. Whatever secrets Arthur Blackthorne tried to conceal, she is now certain they were damning enough to leave a stain that even time could not erase. With the next phase of her journey in sight, Ellie knows she must press forward, no matter how unsettling the path may become. With the next phase of the journey in sight, Ellie finds herself stepping into the heart of Raven's Hollow, a town cloaked in a quiet unease. The air feels heavy here, as if the past lingers just beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed. Determined to uncover more about Blackthorne Mortuary's dark history, she seeks out the few locals who might hold the keys to its secrets. First on her list is Agnes Whittaker, the town's unofficial historian, known for her vast collection of old records and a sharp memory that seems untouched by the passage of time. Agnes lives in a weathered, ivy-covered cottage at the edge of town, its overgrown garden a mirror to the funeral home's decay. As Ellie knocks on the door, it creaks open just enough to reveal a single wary eye peering out. Agnes listens in silence as Ellie explains her purpose, her expression guarded, as though weighing the risks of what she's about to say. Finally, in a voice just above a whisper, Agnes mutters, "Some places are forgotten for a reason, dear. You ought to leave it that way." Despite her words, Agnes eventually allows Ellie inside. The small, dimly lit room is crammed with stacks of yellowed papers, faded photographs, and dusty books. As Ellie presses for answers, Agnes shares fragments of the funeral home's troubled past, speaking in riddles mixed with veiled warnings. She mentions rumors of late-night activity at the mortuary, the kind that drew curious gazes from neighboring windows, but also left those daring enough to investigate full of regret. There were things, Agnes says, her gaze distant, as though reliving the memories. Things you wouldn't believe even if I told you. Yet, just as quickly, she clams up, refusing to elaborate further, as if the weight of her knowledge is too great to bear. Before Ellie leaves, Agnes grips her arm unexpectedly, her voice trembling as she warns, "Whatever you're looking for in that place, it's looking back at you." Be careful. Ellie's next stop is Harold Baines, a former groundskeeper for the mortuary and a man whose demeanor suggests he'd rather be left alone. She finds him in the local diner, hunched over a cup of black coffee, his grizzled face hidden beneath the brim of a battered hat. Harold is initially tight-lipped, responding to Ellie's questions with curt nods and vague grumbles. It is only when she mentions the mysterious ledger and the unmarked deliveries that his hand freezes mid-air, the coffee cup hovering inches from his lips. His eyes dart around the room, scanning for unseen listeners, before he leans in and speaks in a low voice. "You're messing with things you don't understand." Those deliveries weren't normal, and neither was Arthur Blackthorne. He had a way of making people disappear. Harold sits back abruptly, his lips pressed into a thin line, as if regretting he had spoken at all. No amount of prodding gets him to add another word. As Ellie leaves the diner, a strange feeling of vulnerability settles over her. The reluctance of both Agnes and Harold speaks volumes. These people know more than they are willing to share, and the fear in their voices is unmistakable. The pieces of the puzzle are beginning to form a shape, but it is one that only deepens the sinister shadow looming over Blackthorne Mortuary. Ellie realizes now that the truth might not just be hidden. It might be intentionally buried by those who would rather let its horrors fade into history. Yet their cryptic warnings do nothing to dissuade her. If anything, they solidify her resolve. With the echo of Agnes's trembling words and Harold's nervous glance still fresh in her mind, Ellie knows her next step must take her back to the funeral home. Whatever secrets lie within its crumbling walls, she is more determined than ever to uncover them, no matter the cost. With the next phase of the journey in sight, Ellie steps back into the forsaken halls of Blackthorne Mortuary, the air within colder and heavier than she remembers. Dust swirls around her boots as she navigates the dim, decaying interior, her flashlight sweeping across the broken furniture and peeling wallpaper. The silence here is oppressive, broken only by the faint groans of the building settling into its despair. Determined to push past the unease clawing at her, Ellie retraces her steps through the funeral parlor, meticulously examining every corner she might have overlooked. It is in the library, a room lined with warped bookshelves and littered with scattered pages, where something catches her eye. Behind a shelf partially collapsed under the weight of time, she notices an irregular gap in the wall. Heart-pounding, Ellie carefully pulls at the rotten wood, and with a groan, the shelf shifts to reveal a narrow, concealed door, its surface marked with faint scratches, as if someone or something had desperately tried to claw their way out. Hands trembling, Ellie forces herself to steady her breathing as she reaches for the rusted handle. It resists at first, the years having sealed it shut, but with a determined shove, the door creaks open, releasing a gust of stale, frigid air that carries with it the faint, metallic tang of something long forgotten. Shining her flashlight into the darkness, Ellie steps into the hidden room, her stomach tightening at the sight before her. The walls are lined with shelves, holding jars filled with cloudy, yellowed liquid. Their contents are grotesque, unidentifiable fragments suspended in preservation, each more unsettling than the last. Against one wall stands a table, its surface corroded and stained, surrounded by medical equipment so antiquated it seems more suited to a museum than practical use. Strange contraptions and rusted tools are scattered haphazardly, their purposes as inexplicable as the room itself. Ellie's eyes land on a desk tucked into the corner, its surface cluttered with crude notes written in a shaky, frenzied hand. Flipping through the papers, she struggles to make sense of the fragmented sentences and cryptic symbols that dominate the pages. Words like reanimation, vital essence, and soul binding leap out at her, their implications chilling. A leather-bound journal sits at the edge of the desk, its cover worn smooth as if handled obsessively. Inside, sketches of human anatomy intertwine with diagrams of archaic rituals, each page more disturbing than the last. One drawing depicts a human figure, surrounded by what appears to be binding chains of light, accompanied by a scrawled note that reads, "The tether must hold." As the pieces begin to coalesce in her mind, Ellie's unease deepens. This room was not meant for standard mortuary practices. It was a laboratory for experiments that blurred the line between science and something far darker. The jars, the tools, the notes, they all point to a grotesque obsession with manipulating life and death, something that transcended the natural order. Suddenly, Ellie feels a faint whisper of air brush past her ear, as if the room itself is breathing, watching, waiting. Her flashlight flickers, plunging her into brief darkness before the beam sputters back to life. As her pulse quickens, she takes a step back, the weight of the funeral home's secrets pressing heavily on her chest. It is no longer just a place of death. It is a place where death was defied, distorted, and perhaps unleashed. Whatever happened in this hidden chamber, Ellie realizes it was far more sinister than she had imagined. Now, with these revelations, her resolve hardens, but so does her fear. What she has uncovered feels like only the beginning of a deeper, more terrifying truth. As the next challenge unfolds, Ellie turns her attention back to the journal, the weight of its disturbing contents urging her to dig deeper. Each page is a glimpse into the fractured mind of Arthur Blackthorne, the funeral home's enigmatic and deeply unsettling former owner. Scrawled notes reveal an obsession that consumed every aspect of his life, an unyielding pursuit of immortality. Blackthorne's writings alternate between meticulous, almost scientific observations and unhinged ravings about the soul, the essence of life, and its mysterious connection to the physical body. Diagrams of human figures are marked with intricate symbols, each annotated with chilling words like anchor point and vessel stabilization. As Ellie delves further, a horrifying picture begins to emerge. This funeral home was never just a place for the dead to find rest. For Arthur Blackthorne, it was a stage for experiments meant to unlock the secret to eternal life. Ellie's breath catches as she finds a series of entries detailing Blackthorne's descent into the occult. He writes of ancient rituals sourced from forbidden texts, ceremonies meant to bind a soul to its earthly form indefinitely. His fascination appears to have spiraled out of control, leading him to test these macabre theories not on himself, but on the deceased entrusted to his care. Ellie pieces together fragments that point to a horrifying truth. Blackthorne had allegedly used the remains of those brought to his funeral home as test subjects. There are veiled references to bodies mysteriously vanishing, carefully worded explanations detailing alternate arrangements for certain clients. Rumors preserved in whispers among the townsfolk now take on a sinister clarity. Blackthorne may have been spiriting away corpses for his experiments, a practice that blurred the line between death and a grotesque mockery of life. The deeper Ellie goes, the darker the revelations become. One particularly chilling entry describes a failed attempt to tether a soul back to its body, where Blackthorne cryptically writes, "The vessel shattered, but the essence did not dissipate. It lingers, seeking form." The implications are harrowing. Could this explain the restless energy pulsing through the mortuary, the shadows that seem to skitter just beyond her vision? Ellie begins to understand that Blackthorne's obsession may have unleashed forces far beyond his control. The journal ends abruptly, its final pages smeared as though by a trembling hand. The last legible words send a shiver down Ellie's spine. The tether holds, but at what cost? Ellie steps back from the desk, her mind racing with the grim puzzle pieces now falling into place. The funeral home was not just a monument to the dead. It was ground zero for Blackthorne's nightmarish ambitions. Whatever he had attempted here did not remain contained, and the consequences of his twisted experiments might still be unfolding. As her flashlight beam sweeps the room one last time, Ellie feels an unmistakable sense of being watched, the air thick with an unnatural tension. A faint, almost imperceptible sound reaches her ears, like the faintest murmur of voices overlapping, whispering unintelligible words. With her pulse quickening and her sense of urgency sharpening, Ellie knows this is far from over. Whatever horrors Arthur Blackthorne unleashed within these walls, she is determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Now turning to the escalating terror that engulfs Ellie, the air in the funeral home seems to grow colder with each step she takes. Shadows flicker at the edge of her vision, darting into the corners of the room just as she turns her head. At first, she convinces herself it's merely her imagination playing tricks, but the occurrences become too deliberate, too precise to ignore. Objects begin to shift ever so slightly. A chair that was facing one way now angled in another, the faint sound of glass rattling when there is no discernible breeze. The temperature dips, an unnatural chill settling into her bones as her breath fogs the air in front of her. Ellie clutches her flashlight more tightly, its beam seeming weaker against the encroaching darkness. A particularly harrowing moment unfolds as Ellie passes by the hidden room she discovered earlier. The door, which she had thought securely closed, now stands ajar, revealing only an ink-eye blackness within. She freezes, her breathing shallow, as a sound rises from the depths, a muffled chant, guttural and rhythmic, as though many voices are speaking in unison. Her instincts scream to turn away, to flee, but something compels her to step closer. The chanting grows louder, words twisting into a language she cannot comprehend, but which fills her with a deep, primal dread. When she finally peers into the room, her flashlight flickers violently, plunging her into momentary darkness. What Ellie sees next feels like a waking nightmare. The shadows on the walls begin to move, forming grotesque, elongated shapes that twist and contort unnaturally. A vision overtakes her. She sees the funeral home as it once was, bustling with activity. But the scene is grotesquely wrong. The staff move with jerky, puppet-like motions, their faces blurred as they carry out rituals that defy comprehension. At the center stands Arthur Blackthorne, his gaze unnervingly steady, his mouth moving in silent incantation. The vision distorts further, the imagery becoming fragmented, but Ellie catches glimpses of bodies writhing, as though animated against their will, their forms trapped in a state between life and death. The vision abruptly ends, leaving Ellie gasping for air, her knees buckling under the weight of what she has just witnessed. The chanting ceases, but the silence that follows is not a relief. It is heavy, oppressive, and charged with an unspoken malevolence. She stumbles back, slamming the hidden door shut, as if to trap the horrors inside. But in her heart, she knows they are not confined by locks or walls. Whatever Blackthorne unleashed, it lingers here, suffusing every creaking floorboard, every decaying coffin, every breath of icy air. Yet despite the suffocating fear, Ellie's resolve hardens. These encounters, as dreadful as they are, only deepen her determination to uncover the full scope of what happened within these haunted walls. As the next challenge unfolds, Ellie forces herself to steady her breathing, clutching the cryptic notes she had painstakingly pieced together from the ledger and the hidden room. Her mind races, connecting fragments of Blackthorne's twisted experiments with the symbols and chants she had encountered. The notes hint at a ritual reversal, an unbinding meant to release the tormented souls trapped between worlds. It speaks of a central artifact, an object imbued with Blackthorne's dark intentions that must be destroyed to sever the connection. With her heart pounding, Ellie recalls the grotesque centerpiece she had glimpsed in the hidden chamber earlier, a weathered, blackened urn engraved with sinister markings, sitting atop a crumbling altar. She knows without a doubt that this is the artifact she must confront. Summoning every ounce of courage, Ellie pushes open the hidden door once more, the oppressive air within the room greeting her like a physical force. The chanting resumes, louder this time, as if sensing her intent. Shadows writhe against the walls, reaching toward her like living tendrils. She steps forward, her flashlight flickering erratically, illuminating the cursed urn only for brief, disorienting moments. Gripping the notes tightly, Ellie begins to speak the reversal incantation, her voice trembling but growing steadier with each word. The room seems to resist her effort. Objects crash to the floor, the walls groan as if under immense pressure, and a bone-chilling wind howls through the space. The shadows lash out, and Ellie is certain she feels icy fingers brush her skin. As she nears the conclusion of the ritual, the room erupts in chaos. The spirits, desperate to stop her, manifest in grotesque, half-formed shapes, their anguished faces twisted with fury. Her flashlight falls from her hands, its beam casting erratic shards of light across the room as she fumbles for the final lines. With a surge of resolve, Ellie grabs a rusted metal stand nearby, raising it above her head. She slams it down onto the urn with all her strength. The artifact shatters with a deafening crack, releasing an ear-splitting wail that seems to reverberate through the very foundation of the funeral home. The spirits freeze momentarily, their forms shimmering and wavering before dissolving into streams of pale light that swirl upward and vanish. But the victory is short-lived. The building begins to tremble violently, the walls cracking and splintering, as if the energy once bound within the funeral home is tearing it apart. Ellie scrambles to her feet, dodging falling debris as she makes a desperate dash for the exit. The floor buckles beneath her, the ceiling groans ominously, and the oppressive darkness threatens to consume her entirely. Just as she reaches the front door, a massive beam crashes down behind her, sending a cloud of dust and splinters into the air. She bursts into the night, gasping for air, collapsing onto the overgrown lawn as the building behind her gives one final, mournful groan and crumbles inward, finally silencing the horrors within. For a moment, there is only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded only moments ago. As Ellie lies there, staring up at the night sky, she is overcome with a mix of relief, sorrow, and lingering dread. The funeral home may be gone, but its memories, its secrets, are imprinted on her soul, and though she survived, she knows this is a story she will carry with her forever. As the final chapter of Ellie's harrowing experience unfolds, she sits in the quiet solitude of her small apartment, the faint hum of the city outside a stark contrast to the deafening silence that still lingers in her mind. The shattered urn, the anguished spirits, and the crumbling funeral home replay in her thoughts like fragments of a fractured dream. She pulls out her notebook, its pages now filled with chaotic scribbles, cryptic symbols, and the fragile threads of a story she never imagined she would unravel. Writing has always been her sanctuary, a way to find order in the chaos, but tonight the words feel heavier, imbued with a weight she cannot shake. In the days that follow, Ellie reflects on what she has uncovered. The funeral home was not simply a place for mourning. It was a vessel for Arthur Blackthorne's obsession, a testament to how far the human mind can bend in its pursuit of power and immortality. She thinks about the spirits, their suffering, and the release that came with the destruction of the artifact. Perhaps in some way she had given them peace, though the scars of their torment lingered in the very ground where the funeral home once stood. Ellie knows she is not the same person who first stepped into Raven's Hollow, driven by curiosity and a thirst for the unknown. The experience has left her both stronger and more vulnerable, her resolve tempered by the realization of how thin the line is between life and the horrors that lie just beyond. And yet, even as Ellie tries to move forward, she cannot escape the feeling that her journey with Blackthorne's dark legacy is not truly over. One evening, as she organizes her notes, a chilling breeze sweeps through her apartment, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of decay, a scent she remembers all too well. Her eyes dart to the corner of the room where an unmarked box she had taken from the funeral home sits untouched. Inside, she knows, are the remnants of Blackthorne's twisted experiments, fragments she had planned to analyze, but now hesitates to touch. The air grows heavier, and a faint whisper brushes her ear, not words, but a sound that chills her to the bone. Ellie shuts the box tightly and steps back, her pulse racing. She does not know if it is simply her mind playing tricks on her, or if Blackthorne's influence still lingers, tethered to the relics of his dark past. One thing is certain: while the funeral home may be gone, its secrets are far from buried. This realization sends a shiver down her spine, a reminder that the lines between the living and the dead are not as clear as they seem. What do you think, viewers? Could Ellie have unknowingly brought a piece of Blackthorne's darkness with her? Or is his power something far greater, lingering in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to resurface? Share your theories in the comments below and let us know your thoughts on Ellie's haunting journey. If you enjoyed unraveling the chilling secrets of the forgotten funeral home, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another mysterious tale. Until next time, stay curious and sleep with one eye